Hello from me. Also, thank you for joining us here today in this PhD meeting. And about me, I'm presenting our ongoing research within the TALOS-AI Process Age project regarding the quantitative analysis of curricula through the natural language processing techniques. Our research focuses on mapping language and literacy representations in Greek language curricula. We are applying natural language processing technique to systematically map how language and literacy are represented within the Greek school curricula regarding the language teaching there. As researchers, at the intersection of AI and the humanities, our goal is to show how computational methods can unmask the underlying pedagogical realities of educational policy documents. Let's start with the core problem outlined on this slide, the rhetoric versus the reality gap. If you look at the left column, the rhetoric, official policies heavily promotes how new literacy studies concepts. It explicitly says that the goal is to foster critical literacy and view language as embedded in diverse social, cultural, and political contexts. However, the reality, when we analyze the core context, the actual teaching units and objectives, we see a reliance on traditional teaching principles. Language is treated as a collection of autonomous skills like grammar and syntax. And here is the issue. Our curricula as internally contradictory texts. They are deemed modern because they adopt the vocabulary of the ideological model. However, the fundamental educational practice described within them remains stuck in the autonomous model. We have known that this for years through qualitative research, but policymakers carefully change based on thematic analysis alone. When we analyze curricula, we run into a persistent paradox. The rhetoric often promises modern goals like fostering critical literacy and a critical state towards texts. Yes, the reality of the core context relies on traditional teaching principles, focusing heavily on the contextualized autonomous skills like grammar and syntax. This brings us to the methodological shift. Teachers rarely integrate academic research, and here comes the NLP to offer scalable, rigorous, and visual evidence. The research goal of our research is to reveal underlying assumptions and the dominant conceptualization of language and literacy by the official Greek L1 curricula. We wanted to see if we could provide scalable, rigorous, and visual evidence of this contradiction, revealing that assumptions. The design of our research includes comparative textual analysis, employing NLP techniques, and aims to demonstrate how AI tools and primarily NLP can revolutionize a language curriculum analysis. Our corpus, comprising of the Greek language curricula for primary and secondary education across three key reform periods, 2003, 2011, and the latest 2023 revisions. We designed a vertical comparison across 3 key revisions and also a cross-sectional comparison of the 2023 curricula of all educational levels. The dataset owns all levels, preschool to upper secondary, and we are talking about approximately 550 pages and 187,000 of words of official educational text, actually. What we did with NLP. The corpus undergoes text processing, including initial corpus metrics, calculation of basic statistics. After that, conceptual mapping to measure the existence of autonomous skills versus the social practice. Afterwards, we are locating where these concepts are located, and also the fourth one, the cognitive level analysis. Let's take it step by step. We started with categorization and lemmatization, breaking the text down and reducing words to their roots. A necessary step for Greek due to its high morphosyntactic complexity. Once preprocessed, we generate the initial corpus metrics, mapping the top 100 words, the top 100 diagrams to see if new terminology has been introduced. We created 2 buckets of terminology. The bucket 1 on the left, with terms associated with the autonomous model, like grammar, syntax, spelling, punctuation, etc. And the bucket 2 on the right, with terms associated with social practice, discourse, critical thinking, diversity, ideology, etc. We used NLP to systematically identify and quantify these terms. We track the autonomous skills and also the social skills. However, we faced a major methodological ambiguity. Words like comprehension or production can imply a single autonomous skill or a critical social act, depending on the context. To solve this, we used NLP to extract the context between that words of 5, for example, 5 words before and after the verb, and filter out the words without semantic weight, and then use both human annotation and using now LLMs to perform the disambiguation of that word. This hybrid approach allowed us to explore how AI grouping tendencies versus human decisions. The next step, the next phase, is to locate the conceptual terms. Where are they living within the curriculum? To understand that, to make sense of where these words appear, we have to understand the structure of a Greek curriculum. Generally, it comprises of 2 parts. Part 1, the orientation. This is the philosophy, the vision of the general principles, and part 2, the practice, the specific content, the syllabus with the learning outcomes and the learning objectives. Keep this distinction in mind because it is crucial for our findings. Here we see the insights. For example, an example on the bottom, we use the AntConc tool, which is a Python-based tool, open source, which generates visual distribution of the plots showing normalized frequency of the key terms. Here we see an example on the bottom of one term where it lives, part 1 and part B from the same curriculum, the primary school language curriculum specifically. And the fourth phase in this research is the cognitive level analysis. The purpose is to quantitative analysis the cognitive domain from Bloom's taxonomy, which consists of 6 levels: remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create, with the goal to identify which levels of Bloom's taxonomy domains are emphasized within each curriculum, revealing that way the extent to which knowledge, comprehension, and critical thinking are promoted more. The methodology we follow is the semi-automated identification and coding of verbs and adjectives according to Bloom's taxonomy and a statistical analysis of their distribution. Let's now look at our results. First, a vertical comparison where we see that the sheer value of text has exploded in 2011 and 2023 curricula. Picture 1 on the left. Interesting is that in 2023, the textual volume decreases as we go from primary to high school. So that this is reflecting more contest content in higher grades. It's the bottom picture on the left. We also analyzed the grammatical distribution of the text, the part of speech words. Looking first on the vertical historical comparison, we observed two very distinct trajectories. For primary school, there is a notable continuous increase in both total and unique words across the reforms. It's the left, the two first left bars, unique and total post words for primary school, and on the right we have for the secondary school. We have to say that note that in high school we have also official curricula text only for the revision of 2023. So it's not easy. We cannot have that comparisons for high school across the three revisions, 2003, 11, and 23. Only 23. The primary curriculum documents are simply becoming longer and more lexically saturated over time. However, secondary school behaves differently. The post-tact word count actually peaks in 2011 reform and then decreases in 2023 revision in secondary school. This brings us a cross-sectional comparison looking strictly at the modern 23 curricula. It's the picture on the bottom. Across the different educational terms, we found that the absolute number of post-tax words progressively decreases as we move from primary to secondary education, like the total volume of text. It also happens for the grammar text here. We can now move on to the new terminology in 2023. Examine the new post words and the distribution of these types and highlight a structural balance. As noted on the slide, the distribution highlights a distinct structural balance. Even as the curricula evolve, the proportional grammatical distribution, the ratio of nouns to verbs to adjectives remains remarkably stable across the revisions. Building on that of new terminology, let's look at exactly which words defined in 2023 reform. Starting with the primary education, we see a massive rhetorical push towards technology with digital appearing 106 times. However, look at the accompanying high-frequency words, thematic, identification, and structure. This suggests that while digital mediums are introduced, they are heavily tended to the traditional structural identification tasks also. In secondary education, we see high frequencies for terms like semiotics, multimodal, and social cultural, alongside a balance of conceptual terms like receptions and awareness. Furthermore, our big grammar analysis consistently highlights phrases like critical thinking and digital literacy. So this, see the focus, some the thematics that the curricula set the focus, sometimes with a balance, sometimes with extremely highlight some terms. And we continue with some keywords with logos, speech, text, κείμενο, contact, επικοινωνία, λέξη, word, sentence, πρόταση, and language, γλώσσα, which we observe that in secondary school, we have the skyrocket, especially with the word text, κείμενο, and that is decreasing. All terms are seems to decrease in as we go from primary to high school. So on the surface, the curriculum appears modernized. It introduces highly contemporary vocabulary, but the question is, does this reflect substantive pedagogical change? Let's look on the conceptual mapping ratios. This is the skills versus the social practice breakdown. First, looking at the primary education. In 2003, 80% are skills and 20% social practice, expected for that time. In 2011, we saw a massive shift, nearly 50-50, a balanced approach. In 2023, we have regressed to 71 skills versus almost 30% for social practice. Despite all the digital buzzwords, the core focus has swung back to the autonomous model. Now, the secondary education, we see a similar pattern. 2011 was a peak of social practice, and in 2023, skills have reclaimed the majority with 62% skills versus less than 40% social practice. The data speaks clearly. We are seeing a re-automation of literacy in the latest reforms. And here is the most interesting piece of evidence. Remember part 1, the philosophy, and part B, the practice within the curricula. Using the tool, ANTCO, we visualize the distribution of these terms. And we found that the social practice terms, like critical thinking, discourse, are heavily clustered in part A. They are mostly in the introduction. The autonomous skill terms, on the other, grammar, syntax, dominate part B. They are the actual part job description. So the curriculum talks progressively in the introduction, but acts traditionally in the syllabus. NLP gives us the opportunity to visualize this rhetoric versus reality gap perfectly. Here we see an example. On the plot on the right, You see, the blue lines show us, the blue bars show us where the most frequencies, the most occurrences of that term are appeared. Let's now look at the results, mapping these action verbs against Bloom's taxonomy, the revised edition. As you can see, primary school exhibits the absolute highest frequency of measured action verbs across every single cognitive category. From left to right, we have the 6 categories of Bloom's taxonomy, starting from remember and ending to create. As students age and the education level advances, the total volume of these explicit targeted action verbs decreases. This perfectly aligns with our previous finding that upper grade texts become more condensed and abstract. Looking at the distribution across the specific cognitive level, we see a clear structural peak at analyzing. Analyzing is the 4, so which is the higher one, the four bars, followed by a focus on understanding, which is the second, and we see the low emphasis on the note remembering, which is the first one, as a possible sign that we must also note that the higher order critical skills evaluating and creating, which is the 5th and the 6th, show only moderate representation. What does this mean for us? It means that the current curricula reinforce the autonomous model by segregating critical literacy into the philosophical intro and filling the practical syllabus with skills, but limit critical language awareness. We are teaching students to be technicians of language, not critical citizens of a digital society. So, where do we go from here? Counting words is just the first step. Our next phase is constructing the curriculum knowledge graphs. Instead of just frequency, we want to map relationships. We want to see, does this critical literacy link to evaluation? Or does it float in solution? A knowledge graph will allow us to see the network of the curriculum, providing a blueprint for how to actually integrate these concepts rather than sprinkle them on top. And let me say that this work already contributes in 2 conference papers. The first one was in the previous week in the conference, International Conference Literacies Contemporary Society in Nicosia, Cyprus. I was presented this there. And the next one is in May in Thessaloniki in the conference, the 27th International Symposium on Theoretical and Applied Linguistics. And let me introduce the co-authors also. My Professor Katsaroleni, Janaki Maria, and Daskalaki Irini, which helped me on that, and affiliation with TALOS-AI for SSH Lab, the project founded by the European Union under the Horizon Europe project. In conclusion, I want to say that AI and NLP give us the lens or a mirror to see our educational documents as they truly are, not as we want them to be. That's all for now. Thank you for enduring this far, and I'm waiting for your questions.